going to go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for being here. This is the June 2024 Ttcda meeting. First up, we do have a quorum, I see, which is great. And then secondly, we've got the minutes. You received the minutes earlier, so hopefully you've looked at those, and I'll entertain a motion.
I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
I second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, first up on the list for applications for certificates of appropriateness. First is Scott Davis, if I butcher this, I apologize, Masana Investments, LLC, which is 4-A-24-TOR, and this is, they're asking for a postponement of 30 days. So I will entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion to postpone.
I second that motion.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next up on the list, yes.
I know we've seen this before, right? Last month,
Which one?
the Scott Davis. Yeah, so it was initially on the agenda in April, and then they revised it last month, and then they withdrew it, and they're resubmitting for next month for Planning Commission. But it's going to go back to this original application of PR at 5 dwelling units an acre. I know a big part of the process is what happens behind the scenes in between these. I knew I'd seen it. I was trying to recall.
Yeah, they were making some revisions with the planning commission and put it on hold here until everything planned out over there. So all the changes they made weren't reflected in any of the documentation that you all had. And now they're going back to that original request, so they can still be heard concurrently next month.
Okay, next up on the list, Level Place LLC, Level Place at Cornerstone LLC, which is 6-A-24-TOR. If we could get a staff report, please.
Yep. So this is a rezoning request from OB, which is Office Medical and Related Services, Agricultural, and the Technology Overlay, to CA with the Technology Overlay. This is 12.06 acres at Level Road and Cornerstone Drive. And so only a portion of the property is in the Technology Overlay. So the square-shaped or rectangular that you see here, that's the rezoning request to go to CA for that area. And that diagonal line with the hatching, that's all in the Technology Overlay, but this request is for that entire rectangle. So the future land use map shows the CA, the general business zone, is partially related to the Knox County Comprehensive Plan place type corridor mixed use land use designation. And this prescribes retail uses to be along major corridors. Level Road is a minor arterial street that has multimodal options. There have been a number of commercial rezonings in this area to CA, planned commercial, and CB, the business and manufacturing, since 1993. Level Road was widened from 3 lanes to 5 lanes with the addition of sidewalks and bike lanes in 2010. The improvement supports additional commercial activity at this location. The Knox County Comprehensive Plan Implementation Policy 5 calls for creating neighborhoods with a variety of housing types and amenities in close proximity. This location is appropriate for CA zoning and retail services, as the property abuts multifamily residential to the west and multifamily and single-family developments on the other side of Level Road. So the picture on the right is the property or the area of the property that is within the TO overlay. It's also the application 6A24 TOG, which has been postponed, or they're requesting postponement for 60 days. They have submitted a grading plan, and that'll be scheduled to be heard at the August meeting. And so a portion of this property is in the HP overlay, and that will be subject to slopes conservation as described in section 1.12 of the Ttcda guidelines. Additionally, any development plan in that HP area will also come back to this board, or any development plan will come back to this board. And then on the left is that whole rectangle area, which is the area that they're requesting for the rezoning. So the recommendation is to approve the CA general commercial zone because it's consistent with the new comprehensive plan and surrounding development, and the technology overlay would be retained.
All right. Any questions for staff? Is the applicant here or represented? If you'll give us your name and your address, please.
Thank you. My name's Ben Mullins, 550 West Main Street, law firm of Francis McConnell Seymour. The property owner, Ruth Ellis, she's here as well. I mean, she's placed both of these properties in the LLCs that are on the application, but this is family property. She's owned it, or her family's owned it since the 1950s, and she grew up on it. You know, she's had different plans for this property for quite some time. She wanted to get the back portion of the property developed before looking at what to do with the front portion, which she retained. You can see the remainder is left, that kind of that polygon that goes down towards Level Road and in the back. That was, the entire property was zoned to OB a couple of years ago to accommodate some multifamily apartments that are going in on that property. And of course, there's some multifamily across the street on the old US Cellular soccer fields as well. And so all those apartment units are coming online soon and are in different stages of construction. So what she had envisioned was looking at this front portion that had the frontage on Level Road. She's been approached in the past by various grocery outlets or retailers about, you know, maybe this property being appropriate for that type of use, and so she's hoping to attract that kind of business to serve the existing and the oncoming population that's coming to that area. And so, you know, they'll have some retail there close to where they live, and you know, maybe not have to go so far down into Turkey Creek or Farragut. So that was what she envisioned. We were looking at this before the land use map change. In fact, I think when we filed it, we looked at whether even a sector plan amendment would be needed, but then the effective date of the future land use map changed, and with the corridor mixed use, the CA is partially related, and that's, you know, so I think it fits in even better with it. We don't have to change the map as part of this, where in the old zoning and you know, the sector plans we would have. So, you know, I think it's compatible with what's there, what's coming, you know, and what she's been approached in the past as a potential development partner for this property. So we appreciate staff's recommendation and would ask for an approval.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here that's opposed or to speak against? All right. Any questions?
So CA general business could be anything from a grocery store to a bookstore to a dry cleaners to, you know, those kinds of retail.
Yeah, it's a retail area. There's a number of uses listed, but generally the county will permit the majority of retail uses.
All right. I'll entertain a motion if there's no other questions.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the change in zoning to CA general commercial.
I'll second that motion.
All right. Have a motion, have a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you. All right, next up on the list is Daniel McGuffin Branded Image Group 6-A-24-TOS. If we can get a staff report, please.
Sure. This is a request to add 2 building signs and a yard sign to a self-storage facility. So one building would be located on the northwest facade facing Dutchtown Road. The other would be on the northeast facade facing Cogdale. The yard sign would be at the rear of the parking island at the entrance to the site off of Dutchtown Road. Okay. There we go. Okay, so the number 1 sign and number 2 sign, those are those 2 building signs. So the sign number 1 is 42.38 square feet. Sign number 2 is 23.9 square feet. So the total cumulative is 66.33 square feet. That's well within the 100 maximum allowable square footage based on a building's linear frontage of 240 feet. The building signs will be comprised of aluminum perforated channel letters backlit with LED lighting to create a halo effect. They will be directly mounted to the building facade via a raceway that's painted to match the building, and the letters will be faced with green and white vinyl and a matte finish and will feature gray trim caps. And then there's an elevation of building sign number 1, so you can kind of see what that looks like. It's the next slide, I believe. Yeah, so extra space storage is all on one line in the very center of the building. And then on building sign number 2, extra space is on one line and storage is on another, and that's going to be located in the next slide, in the corner of the building where the higher parapet is. And then next slide. So getting into the yard sign. So the yard sign will also be comprised of aluminum, and both sides of the sign will have vinyl faces with a matte finish. The sign will have a green background and white letters outlined in black. The sign is 5 feet tall and 7 feet wide. And then the next slide shows the site plan where the where the yard sign would be located. And it does show a green buffer circular area at the entrance to the site. Again, that's at the rear of that parking island at the entry. The sign is not dimensioned from the right-of-way, but must be located 20 feet from the right-of-way. In this case, the edge of the parking island curb is 27 feet from the right-of-way, and the sign is 7 feet wide. And because the sign is likely going to be offset from that parking island curb, it's reasonable to assume that a portion of the sign would fall within that 20-foot setback sign area. So planning is proposing a 2-foot reduction from the sign setback area to accommodate this. In this particular case, the site has a stream running through the rear of it, and the building was located closer to Dutchtown Road to limit the disturbance of the stream and the forested area along that southern lot line. So there was a waiver that was approved to reduce the parking lot setback to 10 feet, which of course pushes that island up. So it's hard for them to, for someone to get a sign in that area due to those previous waivers and the site configuration with the stream at the rear of the site. So for those reasons, and because that sign location would not limit site distance, staff is supporting that waiver request. And then the only other thing about that is the existing and proposed signs, materials, proportion, and color are in character with other signs in the vicinity, and that's that last criteria. So we are recommending approval of the request, including the waiver.
All right, thank you.
Couple quick questions.
Mm-hmm.
So you said the proportions are all fall within the required size.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
It just looks big. Sounds big. And then the other thing is how is it that something at the corner of the exit is not going to impede sight distance? We feel like the 18 feet is enough?
Yes, so when the car pulls up to that front of that site, they're going to be past that sign. So if the front edge of the sign would be 18 feet, not the sign itself. So they would have 18 feet for a vehicle to be pulled up towards the front of that to be able to see in both directions. Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, any other questions for staff? Is the applicant here? All right. I assume there's nobody here to oppose. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the waiver to allow the sign to be 18 feet from the right-of-way and to approve the sign provided that it meets all the relevant requirements for Knoxville zoning ordinance.
So approval per staff recommendation.
Yes.
Do I have a second?
I second his motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, next up, Pat Bowles, Sign Co. Incorporated, 6-B-24-TOS. And can we get a staff report, please?
Yes, this is a request for approval of a building sign. This property is adjacent to the one we were just looking at. It is a different office building. So this building sign is on the existing office building that's 26,000 square feet at Cogdill Road and the Dutchtown Road interchange. The proposed sign includes the business name, which is Ridgebrook Tax and Retirement, and the logo for that company. The sign will be located on the north side of the building that faces Cogdill Road on the brick facade on the second floor in the middle. There are 2 existing signs on this side of the building, one for Denton Financial and one for Gentiva Hospice. The sign size allowed is 100 square feet, which is based on the building frontage. Since there are multiple building signs already, the square footage for all 3 signs will be up to 100 square feet. The proposed sign comprises of an area of 52 square feet. Denton Financial Group and Gentiva Hospice already have signs, and together they are 49 square feet, or 48 square feet, making the total for this office building 99.27 square feet, which is within the maximum size allowed. The new sign consists of halo LED illuminated reverse channel letters mounted on the building via a raceway. The sign will have a matte brush aluminum paint finish. And based on these plans, recommending approval. Are there any questions?
Of course. So you're saying the maximum is 100?
Yes.
Just looking at the picture, it looks like 30% of it is this one, and you said that's 50 feet.
Yes, so the way that, I guess, kind of adding up the square footage works is you can do individual letters, or you can do, I guess, the length of this one. So the previous signs, they submitted them doing individual letters. So I think this sign is actually smaller than the 52 square feet, but the way that they've submitted it, it still meets the maximum, so I didn't request a different calculation from them.
So, and again, for future reference, they can actually just measure each of the individual letters, add those up, and the spaces don't count?
Right.
So it's not linear?
Or you can submit it this way as well. So you can make that sign size smaller,
So,
essentially.
so, so question, given that situation, they're actually penalizing themselves at this point
Yes.
because they actually have additional, how would we handle it if,
That's my question.
yeah,
Unless this is all the occupants that there are, we're gonna have a problem.
Right, so that's essentially, they've maxed out the building without doing new signage. Or they could resubmit this sign measuring each.
And I'll also just kind of say, the Ttcda guidelines didn't really anticipate multi-level, multi-tenant buildings. It really only addresses multi-tenant buildings that are next to each other in a more like a strip center type of fashion, in which case you measure the business frontage. And in this case, if you used business frontage for multi-tenant, then everyone would have the maximum number over and over again. So we are limiting it to the max that's allowed for the building. Understanding that even if you have 5 tenants on the inside, you may not want 5 signs on the building, because after a while it can kind of be maybe a little bit confusing and maybe not look so great. So in this case, we would probably recommend that everybody work together, and if they all wanted signs, maybe to do some sort of multi-tenant directory sign or something like that, that could maybe accommodate an additional business. Or they would have to request a waiver from you all to put an extra sign for another tenant on the building.
So could they come back and say, we want to give you new measurements that measure the individual letters, and then we have to redo the numbers?
So if somebody else wanted to, I mean, I doubt that there would be enough square footage left over, so they might get a little bit of square footage by doing it letter by letter instead of the outline around the whole thing, but probably not enough to allow a whole nother sign. But if they did have enough to provide a whole nother sign, say someone wanted just a logo or something like that, then we would probably allow this to come through that same request and sort of alter the measurements that way. I don't know that we would post here another request for the sign that was already up.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? All right, is the applicant here? All right, assuming nobody's opposed. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept as staff has recommended.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next up on the list, Level Place LLC, Level Place at Cornerstone LLC, 6-A-24-TOG, and there's a request for postponement of 60 days on this. So any questions for staff? Yeah.
What's the difference between the one we just approved? It's the same address.
So this is for a grading permit. You're talking about the rezoning?
What's the difference between,
It's the building permit versus the rezoning.
yeah,
Or the,
The rezoning, now this is, I'm following, thank you.
all right. Any other questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the postponement of the application 60 days.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next up on the list, so, 1 second.
Just go ahead. Okay, next on the agenda, Ronald W. Watkins, application number 2-A-24-TOB. Request is for a building permit, and I see that someone's here representing Mr. Watkins. Or do we go to you first? Okay,
Yeah.
staff first. Ask for a staff recommendation.
thanks.
Also, real quick, just to interject, we also should put into the record that Chair Matherly has recused himself and has left the room for this discussion.
So the proposal is for a new office retail building at Lovell Road and Yarnell Road. The proposed building is 26.
So you have a quorum to hold the meeting, and then the majority of the remaining sitting people can vote, so, yep.
The proposed building is 26,600 square feet, 22 feet tall on this 5-acre lot. There is no floor plan. This is for a shell building. So this property is in the planned commercial zone with a technology overlay. The PC zone, there's not an intent to restrict what type of use can be here, but in general, what is permitted is office and commercial and light distribution centers. The retail office building is consistent with the intent of the PC zone. And then properties in the PC zone also require development plan approval by the Planning Commission. So this case will be scheduled to be heard this Thursday, and that's the 3A24DP case file number. The proposals for a new office retail building that's a shell building, there are 3 proposed driveways on this lot. There's one off of Yarnell Road, which will be right-in, right-only if site distance cannot be met. There are 2 driveways on Lovell Road, which is a Ttcda road. The driveway closest to the intersection will also be right-in, right-out only. And the second driveway in Lovell will have full access. And there are existing sidewalks and bike lanes on Lovell Road, and per the county sidewalk ordinance, a sidewalk will be required along Yarnell Road. A traffic impact study was done, and that recommends reconfiguring the signal timing with the optimized signal timings to reduce the current considerable vehicle delays that are westbound and eastbound on Bob Gray and Yarnell. Additional vehicle storage should be provided for the eastbound approach to Yarnell Road. And this could potentially require adding a few feet of pavement to the curve on Yarnell. And lastly, the construction of a separate southbound right turn lane on Lovell Road for vehicles entering the proposed full access driveway. The parking lot has 118 spaces, including 12 bicycle spaces, and this meets the Ttcda guidelines with an 80 space minimum and 120 space maximum. This building will be 1 and 2 story and is approximately 22 feet tall. The proposed materials consist of brick veneer and precast concrete cornice, and the building will have large storefront windows. The applicant is requesting 2 waivers. A waiver of section 2.3 requiring a floor plan, since this is a shell building and the floor plans will be determined based on the tenant needs. Staff supports this waiver on the justification provided by the applicant, and because the only requirement for floor plans is essentially to show entries and exits. And this would also be looked at, again, the floor plans during the permitting stage. The second waiver is for section 1.4.1 pertaining to the 100-foot setback that's required when abutting a property that's a residential use. The rear of the building is approximately 63 feet from the property line adjacent to a single-family subdivision. The applicant has stated there's a irregular shape of the lot, and only a small portion of the building is within this 100-foot setback, and that's just that corner. I'm not sure if I can point on here. Just this corner right here. So additionally, lighting levels at the shared property line with the residential properties will be 0-foot candles. So this issue, there is a grade difference between the 2 properties. This property does sit about 60 feet above the subdivision below, but there is landscaping in the rear, and the foot candle levels will be 0, and they will have the full shields on them. So staff is supporting this waiver of approximately 2,360 square feet of the rear of the building to be 63 feet from the property line instead of 100 when abutting residential subdivision, because the photometric plan shows 0-foot candles and landscaping has been provided. That landscape plan meets all the Ttcda guidelines, including both streets, Lovell Road and Yarnell Road, are screened. So staff is recommending approval for this request for a certificate of appropriateness for a building permit, and that includes these 2 waivers of reducing the 100-foot rear setback for the property adjacent to the residential subdivision with 63 feet along the southwest property line where the property abuts the subdivision, and a waiver to not require a floor plan based on no tenants being identified yet. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions for staff?
I guess I would like to ask, and again, this is the newbie here trying to understand, when do we allow for the waiver that they ask for and say it's okay, and when do we say it's not okay? I mean, 63 from 100 is a significant difference, almost 40%, almost, half. And if I'm one of the people that lives in that yard that I just looked up in there, I'm sure I'm gonna ask this board why.
Yeah, I think the justification in this case was kind of based on this lot shape, trying to, get access, get all the minimum parking requirements. They've met the landscaping guidelines, they've met the lighting intensity guidelines.
Did the staff look to see that exactly where that building is the smallest backyard for the neighbors? Because it is, the smallest backyard is where that will hit. So that, they'll be the closest to the house.
Yeah, I think the subdivision's maybe approximately like 20 homes, and there's maybe 5 that back up to this. I could,
Whitney,
oh, okay.
yeah, Whitney,
I
We
pulled
are-
it up to look.
we also provided a diagram here, if I can show them. This
Yeah,
was in
yeah.
our application packet. So we took a section off of KGIS, so you can actually see this is the one that's open. 100
Whitney, is it possible to pull up the landscape plan again that you had up before?
I've also looked into the Ttcda guidelines. I can tell you exactly what they say about waivers. So I can do that while she's working on getting that pulled up. Just bear with me. Try to get to that section.
Thank you.
Okay, it says the Tennessee Technology Corridor Development Authority may grant waivers. Of course, now it's not wanting to. Sorry. Now there's a big square over that part of the text that won't let me read it.
So, while you're doing that, let me ask another question then. Do we know what that landscaping looks like? Is it,
So it does say on here, it's probably pretty small. It's a type B landscape screen, which is fairly typical requirement with the planning commission adjacent to residential on commercial properties. It is a dense screen, so
does it take into consideration the changes that we made the last time when we discussed the different landscape options?
So those haven't been finalized yet, so we're still working on them, but it's just when our work program allows us to. We've been extremely busy with planning commission cases and have not had an opportunity to finalize the language for you all to vote on to put into the guidelines.
So you're saying we would not be allowed to apply that to this?
No, so this body does have the authority to add those types of things as part of this review process. So the county's guidelines right now currently have a type A and a type B screen. The type B screen, if I remember correctly, is 25 feet deep, and it's trees that are planted, and there's two different versions. There's one that has a berm with a shrub and trees that are farther apart, and then there's one that just has staggered trees. So that's the standard one. Typically, overlays have more stringent requirements than you would find in the other parts of the zoning code. And so, what you all are proposing as to be developed into that has some of that language. Even though there's nothing that's been formally adopted in the guidelines yet, I don't think that precludes you from requiring a type B or something even closer together if you felt like that was warranted due to the presence of the subdivision. And then that recommendation, your vote is basically a recommendation to the planning commission. So at that point, we would revise the documents that go to the planning commission to show that you all are recommending an increased buffer or whatever type of buffer it is that you're going to be requiring if you do. And then they would vote on that. And at that point, that would be the plans that would go into effect would be the one supported by the planning commission or hopefully the recommendation of this board.
So Michelle, if I understand you correctly, we could say that we would agree with the amendments as long as the understanding is that it would abide by the future modification that we made to how would we word that?
Right. You wouldn't be able to hold them accountable to a future wording because we don't have a future wording. So if you wanted to say, you'd have to be real specific with what you wanted. So if we can look up the type B screen buffer on here as well for you all to look at. But say that there are trees planted every 25 and you wanted them to be planted every 20 feet instead. Then you could say a type B buffer with the exception that the trees be planted 20 feet on center instead of 25 or something of that nature.
Are there any other questions for staff? And I do see that someone's here representing the applicant. Would you please state your name and address?
Yes, it's Amy Sherrill, 902 North Central Street.
And do you have anything to add to the application or anything to talk
No,
about?
I think the summary was exactly kind of our point of view here. The irregular shape and trying to meet all the requirements with parking and the building. We just got into a place where that corner just falls into a really weird part of the perimeter, and given the height difference between the pad here and the neighboring residential, it seemed like an appropriate request.
So have you all talked with the neighbors?
I have not personally talked to the neighbors, no.
I know because oftentimes they worry more about the height. I mean, not only are you close, but you're looking in their windows. So I was just curious if you had an opportunity to visit with them, so.
No, and I would say this is of a height that we're looking on their roof. That you're talking about, our finished floor is at a minimum 40 feet higher. In a lot of places, you're in the 50, or a range of 40 to 60 feet, depending on where you cut that section.
Are those numbers in here that show that we're not talking 6 feet, 8 feet, we're talking 40 feet difference?
The overall grading of the current was included. You can see it's a steep bank all the way around that rear side. And then we provided a couple of cross sections as part of our application package to locate those houses relative to the building as well.
Amy, do you think that if that type B screen was also located maybe up the slope, that it would provide additional screening from the houses? I mean, if someone did see above the 20-foot type B screen, it sounds like they would see the building and they would see all these things, so.
I think it's a little bit difficult to say. I think the intent here was that, it talks about around the perimeter, and we were trying to stick to that.
Sure.
In terms of what was regulated. It's also very steep. So it's a question of what can be planted and actually hold. And so, without committing to that with an exact species and engaging a professional to assist in that, I'd hate to commit to that.
That was my only thought is, I certainly understand why those are grouped toward the property line, because that's what the guidelines say to do, but if they were either duplicated or adjusted up the slope, would that help the residents in the houses maybe feel like there's more of a screen? I don't know. What do you all think? Yeah, we can. Are there any residents here? Is there anyone here? Otherwise, okay.
Is there any comments opposed to the plan commission?
We haven't had any comments for the planning commission case, so as long as we don't, it will be on consent on Thursday, but,
You said you've not had any comments?
right. And we didn't have any, when the sign was posted back in March. So this has been a case for a while.
Yeah, and so one of my things on that is if you put your head in the sand, you get what you deserve.
Did you all want me to read any information about what the guidelines say, or the criteria, or what you all need to be looking at for the waiver? Okay. It says the Tennessee Technology Corridor Development Authority may grant waivers when strict application would be infeasible and the objectives of the authority and the general public health, safety, and welfare would not be adversely affected. The criteria for the issuance of such waivers may be factors as unique, such as unique site configurations and features of building construction considerations and parcels of 1 acre or less, which were, and here it's doing this weird thing again. I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Adobe's been limiting. Okay, here we go. Features, building construction considerations on parcels of 1 acre or less, which were created prior to the enactment of the design guidelines. Financial hardship as a single criterion is not considered just reason for the issuance of waivers. So,
Could you read the part that says detrimental to the community? I think something like
it
that.
says it can grant waivers when strict application would be infeasible and the objectives of the authority and the general public health, safety, and welfare would not be adversely affected.
Well, I'd like to ask for a motion.
Well, I do feel like they've had their opportunity. I make a motion to go with the staff recommendation to issue the certificate of appropriateness for the building permit with those 7 conditions.
Do I have a second?
I will second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, on to the next item, which is OKR GP, which is 5-B-24-TOB, asking for a postponement of 30 days.
I make a recommendation, we approve the postponement for 30 days.
We have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, on to the next one, extra space storage, which is 6-A-24-TOB. If we get a staff report, please.
Sure, this is a. Okay. Okay, so this is a request for extra space storage facility at the intersection of Dutchtown and Cogdale. So it's the same property, the same facility that you just heard the sign for earlier in this meeting. So this originally came through in 2022 in April. And at that point, the grading, architectural, landscaping, lighting, and site plans were all approved. Came through for an administrative review in October of that same year, another administrative review in September, and then another one in January of this year. At this point, the building has been constructed and all other approvals remain in effect. The initial approval for case 4B22 was subject to 2 conditions, and those still apply. That said, I will say that the building does encroach into the front setback area along Dutchtown Road. And this was, I'm sorry, can you go to the next slide? There we go. Oh, well. I have, it looks like it's slide number 43. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Yeah, so the original site plans did show that encroachment. I guess due to the scale of it, it wasn't obvious because you can see it just kind of barely clips that side of the building. But that does amount to a 3-foot encroachment into the setback area. And although the building has been constructed, the applicant is having trouble with the financial institution with the waiver and the approval from this board not including that encroachment. So the waiver is being requested after the fact. And again, we're supporting it for the same reasons that we supported the signage waiver, but ultimately we're requesting to reduce the front setback requirement when a parking lot is between the building and the street from 60 to 55 feet. I will say that this is higher than the setbacks that are required within the CH1 zone in the city, which only requires, I believe it's 25 feet. So it's still significantly larger than what would be required due to the base zoning. And again, the encroachment is minimal. It's 3 feet, so we're asking for 5 just to provide a little bit of buffer in case that it got constructed a little bit off.
So the heavy-duty asphalt pavement, is that part of the parking lot?
Yeah, so this is whenever you, so on the image on the right, you can see the driveway off of Dutchtown Road, and it basically is one-way traffic going around the building into that parking area, or you can just take a left into that parking area. So that's just a drive around space, a drive aisle that goes around the building. And then the building itself is the white rectangle within the dark gray pavement area.
So this is not, just make sure that I'm seeing this correctly, it's not the part of the building that is near that entrance. It's only the cars that would be coming around the corner that might not be able to see around the building that's even an issue.
Yeah, no, there's not really an issue with visibility because it's just one-way traffic. So basically you just come into the site and go around the building that way. And then
You can't go 2 ways around the building? It's not 2-way?
I don't believe it is. I'd have to open up the plans and kind of take a closer look. I don't know that it's,
I think one of the things, just looking at that from the standpoint, that's a private drive, right? It's a private drive and how they operate it. I think the big thing here is the setback is related to the street. It's more related to that. It's not related to clearance. It's not clearance on the building or anything. Yeah. Okay. All right, any other questions for staff? All right, we have an applicant present? All right, I assume there's nobody opposed. I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve per staff recommendation.
Do we have a second?
I second the
All right,
motion.
all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next up is Scott Sharp, 6-B-24-TOB. If we could get a staff report, please.
Yeah, I've got the wrong file number up here, but sorry, it's a longer
Is
agenda.
it the right project?
It's the right project. It's a longer agenda than normal, a lot of slides. So this proposal is for a new 2,668 square foot oil change facility on a 1.42 acre site at the intersection of Lovell Road and Centerpoint Boulevard. This property is within the PC zone and technology overlay. The PC zone is intended for unified grouping of commercial buildings which do not require a desire to a central business district location. It's the objective of the zone to achieve the highest quality site design, building arrangement, and landscaping and traffic circulation. The PC zone also requires planning commission approval of plans. That will be scheduled to be heard this Thursday. The file number for that is 6C24DP. This building faces Centerpoint Boulevard and has one driveway access on Centerpoint Boulevard. The parking lot fronts Level Road and the west side of the property. And the floor plan and elevation show this is a three-bay garage. The building will be one story and is approximately 20 feet tall. The proposed materials consist of brick veneer, which is compatible with the other brick buildings within this business park. The roof is a standing seam metal roof. The applicant is requesting one waiver from section 3.33, which requires areas around buildings to be planted with ornamental trees, shrubbery, and bedding plants in a square footage equivalent of 50% of the area comprised by the front and side elevations. This building has no plantings around it. The applicant has stated that the front and rear elevations consist primarily of overhead garage doors and the primary building entry. Because of the circulation on the site, foundation plantings next to the building would be impractical. Staff supports the justification provided by the applicant. Additionally, the landscape plan shows that approximately 1/3 of the site will not be disturbed. All lights show full cutoff wall packs, and the lighting plan meets the Ttcda guidelines for lighting intensity. There's also a sign plan with this application. The sign has one monument sign and two building signs. The monument sign has channel lettering with a matte finish. It reads Express Care Veveling Quick Lube and will be placed on the side of the building facing Level Road. The sign is red, blue, and white and will be lit by LED ground-mounted lighting. The size of the sign will be 41 square feet on each side, totaling 82 square feet. The maximum size allowed is based on the business frontage, 1 square foot per linear foot of frontage, maximum to 100 square feet. In this case, there's building frontage of 72 feet on Centerpoint and 36 on Level, so the proposed 84 is under the 100 square foot maximum. The building signs are white channel letters directly mounted to the brick with a matte finish. The two building signs are identical and read Express Care Veveling. The colors are the same as the monument sign, the red, white, and blue. The building signs are 44 square feet each, which is in total under the 100 square foot maximum. Okay, so staff is recommending approval, including, and I don't have a waiver slide, but for that one waiver, and that was to allow for the exception, to allow the waiver for the building to be planted with ornamental trees, shrubbery, and bedding in a square footage equivalent of up to 50% of the area comprised of the front and side elevations. Any questions?
Quick question.
Yep.
So we've got, you're actually recommending the waiver requirement, but that's actually not notated in the staff recommendations.
Oh.
So, or at least on the summary sheet.
No.
Yeah.
But not in it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there should be an additional staff recommendation to waive the requirement for the areas around the building, so you would need to incorporate into your
Yeah.
motion.
Yep.
So I have another question, and again, just trying to understand this, the 100 square feet for signage, there's 100 for the monument sign and another 100 for building signs.
Yes.
Any other questions?
I do have a quick question. I understand the idea of not providing landscaping all around the building. Did staff look at the landscaping they are showing out in the site, and if essentially they're kind of swapping one for the other, like, are they overdoing it out on the perimeter because they're not doing it around the building? Does that make sense?
Could you ask that another way?
Are we giving them a reduction overall, or have they added additional landscaping out at the roadway, at the perimeter, or behind the building that would make up for what the foundation plantings they're not putting in?
Thank you.
Right, I don't think there's a reduction. I think part of it was just looking at, a lot of times the whole site gets graded or disturbed, and this whole back area is gonna remain undisturbed. And then the rest of the landscaping, other than this building elevation requirement, is met.
Around which area? Is it,
So the right-of-ways have to be screened, and so it fronts both Center Point, oh, no, that's not showing, is it? We've got Center Point here, which is screened, and then these are large trees, which are also screening Level Road. And then this area will remain undisturbed.
Did staff consider plantings on the ends of the building where the garage doors are not? I think it's gonna look really weird, not having a single plant around that building.
You can certainly add that to your motion if you like. In this case, because the TTCA, there's a requirement for yard plants, and it does allow for undisturbed areas to count towards that. So it's hard to ask for extra in that case, but in terms of, your question about the other side of the building or entries, we could certainly ask for more in those areas.
But that wouldn't be something that staff would see and recommend?
no, we can do it as, as a part of the motion. We don't have to, but we can.
I just like accepting their recommendations because I know they've done all the work,
I
so.
understand. Is there an applicant here for this? If you could please give us your name and your address, please.
It's Matthew Baumgartner, 1545 Western Avenue, Suite 100.
Okay. Just if, it sounds like to me, just based on our back and forth right here, I think generally everybody's okay with everything, but maybe would like to see some landscape around the building because it is very stark. And
Yeah.
would there be an issue if we requested some plantings, some foundation plantings or something along the sides of the buildings where you don't have openings?
No, that's completely fine on the sides. It was just that front and back that it
Okay.
just wasn't going to work with
Okay.
the overhead doors.
All right. Any other questions? All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how would I'd like to make a recommendation to accept it with the modification for some ground plantings on the ends of the building that do not have the garage doors. How,
Can we do it where we say that we would like to have 50% coverage on the foundation plantings on the two ends, something to that nature? That way it's not totally stark, but there's something.
and I think you'll be happier too.
Yeah.
So, all right.
So, yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we
Real quick,
have you,
hold up. All right. Is there anybody here that's opposed? All right. Now.
I'm learning. So I'd like to make a motion that we accept as the staff has proposed with the modifications of moving the waiver down under the staff recommendation, as well as adding a recommendation for 50% ground planting on the ends of the building that do not have the garage doors.
All right. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, next up on the list is, I'm gonna butcher this, Arsip Horobit, 6-C-24-TOB, and this is an automatic postponement. And do we have to vote on that?
No.
We don't have to vote on that. All right. Okay, so we're down to other business, and what looks like we've got an administrative review. I will turn it over to staff. Ice cream. Can I get an ice cream?
Okay, so this is a administrative review for a multifamily development that was previously approved March of '23. It's a 316-unit multifamily development on Gliding Hawk Lane, just south of Hardin Valley Road to Carmichael Road at Valley Vista Road, on 39.27 acres. This is the first administrative approval. So this plan has 7 3-4 split multifamily buildings, 4 3-story buildings, and 1 carriage house. The original approval was for 274 units at a density of 6.98 dwelling units per acre. The previous plans had 8 carriage houses. The proposed plan just has 1 carriage house. Buildings 2 through 5, so 2, 3, 4, and 5, have increased their number of units from 28 units to 42. And building 8 was relocated to where building 6 is on the proposed plan. This plan has increased its number of units, so the density went up from 6.98 dwelling units an acre to 8.05 dwelling units an acre. The OB zone, the office and medical zone, allows up to 12 dwelling units an acre by right, and 12 to 24 as a use permitted on review. The number of large trees decreased from 202 to 121 trees, and the medium trees increased from 179 to 181. Combined, there are 302 medium and large trees on the property. The minimum number of yard trees is 262, which is based on the 10 trees per acre of this 26.2 acre site. There are 72 parking lot trees, and the minimum number of parking lot trees is 52, which is based on 1 tree per 10 parking spaces for 521 spaces. And despite the decrease in trees, the applicant is still meeting the minimum number required. And overall, the site plan looks pretty similar. You kind of have to just go through slide by slide to see where some landscaping and buildings were changed. So this is just kind of an example of that, where a quick plan still looks pretty similar, but if you do one of those, where are they changed, you can kind of see.
So can you tell me again what the total number of the density increase was from 6.9 to 8?
Yeah, so the units overall, so in the first plan, they had a bunch of carriage houses, and they got rid of all, but they had 8, and they changed it to just 1. And then they added those units basically into the multifamily buildings.
What's a carriage house?
I think it's essentially like a smaller, like a duplex or something, compared to these larger multifamily buildings.
It's still gonna have people in it.
Yes, the exteriors
not like
haven't
an amenity.
changed at all, so,
I think of them as being similar to a townhouse, because you can have more than 2 in a row. There's typically a garage within the unit on the ground level, so, and then with their residents above.
So any other questions for staff? We actually don't vote on this, so.
So administrative means you're just presenting it, and it means it's gonna come up for voting later? No, it's already been voted on, it's all done.
right, so this was approved back in March of '23, and as long as only 5% of the site plan is changing, it just comes through as administrative.
It's designed for if it doesn't need a waiver and the changes are really minimal, then instead of making them come to you guys again, you can look at it.
So you just let us know.
So you just let you know what happens. It's in the bylaws that we do that, so maybe it's adding rules.
So even though the density increased, this zone allows up to 12 dwelling units an acre. So
Even though the density increased what?
The zoning allows up to 12 dwelling units an acre, so it might seem kind of significant, but in reality, it meets the zoning, so we can't really.
Right.
It did sound like a great reduction in the number of the large trees, and then they increased the medium trees by 2.
Yeah, it was a significant decrease, and they provided tables, and that's how I found the exact number. But then when you really looked at the site plan, there's still a lot of trees, and it still meets the guidelines. So they basically had a lot of trees in the first plan, and the second one still, does more than the minimum.
So again, and I'm sorry I asked so many questions, but this existing zoning is office medical related services.
Yes, and that allows multifamily, up to 12 dwelling units an acre by right, and 12 to 24 dwelling units as a use permitted on review, which be a planning commission application.
And also too, just like this body is mainly just to look at the Ttcda guidelines. The use is governed by the planning commission, so.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
understand.
Sure, we're clear.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? All right, unless there's something else that needs to be added,
COA was issued last week. Forgot that slide.
okay. All right, we are adjourned.